And welcome back, Rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata. And boy, it's been a very interesting last couple of days. Actually, been a very interesting last week of rugby here in the United States. Lots to go over. I'm going to briefly touch a couple of things. I'm probably going to make another video with some of the more positive news in the rugby world as it alludes to rugby in the United States. Because again, even though I'm a lover of rugby from all over the world, this channel is purposely focusing on rugby here in the United States. And like I said, there's been a lot of ups and downs, quite a few downs actually. And so it's been an interesting, like I said, last week or so. But what we do need to talk about is the upcoming action for our USA Eagles men's rugby team taking on a very tough Georgia rugby team, the Lelos, in Georgia. This is actually going to be the 8th time that these two teams have faced off against each other, and the last couple of games between these two have not fared well for the Eagles. But again, we'll go over all of that. Don't forget, this game is going to be this Saturday, November 8th. Kickoff time is, yes, 4 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Again, this game is being played in Georgia, so of course the time zones do not favor us here on the West Coast. It is very early for the East Coast as well, but again, you don't have to watch, unless you're that big of a rugby fan, which hats off to you that you are. You can watch it live or on demand, which is what yours truly is going to do on Paramount Plus. Keep stressing how amazing Paramount Plus is, especially when it comes to rugby. But like I said, even if you're not just all about rugby, there's a lot of great programming on Paramount Plus. If you're a big fan of shows like Dexter's on there. If you're a big fan of the UFC, if you didn't know, UFC pay-per-views no longer going to be a thing in 2026. All their big events are going to be on Paramount Plus, which you can only watch if you subscribe. And again, all the USA Eagles action, even I believe HSBC 7's action will be on Paramount Plus, so you might as well get it if you're a rugby fan. It is a great deal. So let's go over, first of all, last week before this match takes place. Last week, USA had a very, very disheartening game against Scotland. 85-0 was the final score. USA just did not get off of the blocks. I don't want to dwell on the match too much because there's really not really much to say. USA was very much outclassed by a Tier 1 team. And again, I'll go a little bit more into detail the difference between Tier 1 and other tiers in rugby, but Scotland definitely showing their class. If you really put it in a nutshell, the USA were not able to compete with the speed and aggressiveness of Scotland. It wasn't even necessarily a physical game. It was just that Scotland was just always just faster, and their sets, their plays were a lot more strategic. If you watch how Scotland played, there was always at least 3 people running in a pod, like a little 3-man pod or a 2-man pod, so that even if USA's defense was on the player that had the ball, there's always somebody to pass the ball to, and there's always enough people that outnumbered the USA players. So like I said, if it was a man of 3 running in a pod for Scotland, there's only 2 defenders on them. Scotland always was at least 1 man up in whatever play they were playing, and just USA always looked a little dumbfounded by it. Their defense was just non-existent because, again, Scotland always seemed to have 1 extra player per defender for the USA, and it was throughout the entire game. So every time it looked like USA had something going, Scotland always had that extra man, toss the ball, easy score. Also, too, it just felt like even when it came to defense, Scotland was always game tackling against the USA, so there's always that one player able to jackal the ball. It really felt like, unfortunately, I hate to use the analogy, but it really felt like Scotland was playing chess and USA was playing checkers. It's just simply the skill was outdone. I've read, of course, all the social media about it. A lot of criticism for head coach Scott Lawrence. I just feel, yes, that the game plan was not sound, and I feel it just really shows the difference between a tier 1 team like Scotland and a non tier 1 team like the United States, which arguably we are a tier 2 team comparatively to the tier 1, but it's just that level of difference is just so much higher. And so now that leads to this game with Georgia. Now, Georgia is one of the tier 2 teams, like what you would arguably say is the United States, though some people might argue we might not be tier 2 necessarily anymore. But Georgia is a tier 2 team, which a lot of rugby fans, and not just European rugby fans, feel that Georgia should arguably be a tier 1 team, or at least they are the upper echelon of tier 2. If you want to say tier 2A, compared to maybe like a USA team, tier 2B. Now, what is a tier 1? Tier 1 is this hyperbole ranking that the world of rugby fans have created, and it's usually your countries that rugby is more of a dominant sport, and those are the names that you've always heard before. Coincidentally, they're the ones that also participate in the bigger international tournaments. One being the Six Nations tournament, which you have England, Scotland, Wales, Scotland, which is the one team we lost against, Wales, Ireland, France, and Italy. And then you have the other really big competition on the other side of the hemisphere, the Rugby Championship, which involves Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Argentina. So that's 6 and 4. So those are usually your top 10 teams. And coincidentally, they're also usually your top 10 ranked teams as well. Now, just recently, Japan has unofficially been considered a tier 1 team because of all that they've usually been doing, competing really on the same foot as tier 1 nations, though the biggest win was, of course, when Japan had the upset in Brighton and defeated South Africa in the Rugby World Cup back in 2015. That kind of made them the tier 1 unofficial nation ranking. Now, again, some people are arguing that Japan hasn't necessarily been tier 1 caliber in the recent years, and now you have teams like Georgia, and now even Fiji that are now arguably knocking on that tier 1 ranking. Now again, this tier 1 label is an unofficial thing, but like I said, usually the tier 1 teams would be ranked. The World Rugby Organization ranks every team nationally. That's where you see these numbers. They're not just numbers that one makes up. They are actually officially ranked by World Rugby, which is the world governing body of rugby for rugby union teams in the world. And again, your top tier 1 teams are usually in the top 10 rankings. But as you see, Georgia, number 11, kind of knocking on that door. Right now, if you look at the current World Rugby rankings, Japan, unfortunately, is ranked number 13. So again, that's why a lot of people are arguing not necessarily tier 1 caliber right now. And Fiji, who's been really, really great since the recent World Cup, is now currently sitting at rank number 9. So that's why a lot of people are arguing Fiji should be considered maybe a tier 1 team. And like I said, Georgia has been pretty much in like the top 12-ish rankings for at least the last 5 or 6 years. Thankfully, due to the part that Georgia has been dominating the Rugby European Championship, they've won that title 17 times. Yes, 17 times. So they've really been up there in the ranking. And so again, a lot of people have been arguing maybe Georgia should technically be considered a tier 1 team. So what does that mean for the United States? Obviously, that means that Georgia will be a very, very tough team to play. As I mentioned before, this is the 8th time that these two teams have faced off against each other. The record for the United States, unfortunately, is 3 wins to 4 losses, so it's a little bit even. But the last time that the United States has beaten Georgia was way back in 2013, so over 10 years ago, and it was by barely the skin of our teeth, 25-23. That was in Georgia. Since then, Georgia and the United States have faced off against each other 3 times, and Georgia has won all 3 of those. And with the most recent loss about 2 years ago, 2023, Georgia won 7 to 22. Now, again, that was also played in Georgia as well. So, this is going to be a very tough game for the United States. Before we go into Georgia, I will bring up the USA roster because the USA roster is pretty interesting, especially because of what happened with Scotland. And there it is right now. So, the head coach, Scott Lawrence, pretty much did not touch the front half of the team, the forwards, just a little bit of rearranging. What's very interesting, and it's the only kind of positive thing of that game with Scotland was line-out issues were not an issue at all. If you've been following USA Rugby this past year, especially during the Pacific Nations tournament, man, lineouts were a huge issue for US. But in this game, the threesome of Ezekiel Lindemuth, Caleb Geiger, Pono Davis, no issues. So, of course, those three are still intact for this game. A little bit of movement, like I said, Tavita Nagali is coming off of the bench to the number 4 position. Marno Renelingus, the War Machine, Patty Ryan slides to number 7 from the number 8 position. And then the one really big change in this is that Makeen Ali Khan, who I've been highlighting for the last couple of test matches for United States Eagles, part of Anthem Rugby, phenomenal player. He is now starting at the number 8 position instead of coming off of the bench like he did against Scotland. Now, we go to the back half of the team, and that side, after Ruben De Haas, who's once again going to be scrum half, that whole back half of the team, with the exception of Don Bisag, who is your number 13 center, is completely changed. And again, I feel this was made because of the poor defense that the USA showed against Scotland. Your back half, if you're not familiar with rugby, is usually going to be, especially your centers and your fullback, they are going to be your last line of defense. And man, they were so outplayed, like I said, by Scotland. And so I feel that because of that, Scott Lawrence made a huge entire change to that back half. First of all, bringing back Rufus McLean, who was out of the Scotland game because of prior commitments with his club in Europe. So now he is back. And again, Rufus McLean, I felt, really shined during the Pacific Nations tournament. So good to have him back on the winger. Tavita Lopetti comes off of the bench, goes back into center position. Don Bisag, as I mentioned, is still there. And then we have the return of Mark O'Keefe, who, interestingly enough, wasn't part of the traveling roster. So somebody must have got hurt. We're assuming somebody must have got hurt in the roster. So Mark O'Keefe coming off of the injury reserve roster to be the 14 winger. First time this year that he will be playing as an Eagle. And then Toby Fricker, who was the winger in the game against Scotland, moving back to his familiar position at fullback, which I feel Toby Fricker much better at the fullback position. So going back there for better defensive capabilities. Now, also what's interesting, if you look at the reserves, the backups that are sitting on the bench, the 8 players there is a 7-1 split. What that means, if you're not familiar with rugby, is that you're splitting up your reserves between your forwards and your backs. Now, obviously, you can't replace everybody in the 15 one per one because there's only 8 players in reserve. So how do you split it up? Do you go 4 in the front, 4 in the back? This time, Scott Lawrence has done 7 forwards and just 1 back, which is going to be the returning Michael Baska, who will probably be a scrum half for the team from the Chicago Hounds. This is only going to be his 3rd time playing as an Eagle if he comes off the bench. And then you have 7 forwards. So, again, why I feel that is the strategy for Scott Lawrence is because Georgia is a very, very physical team. Watching Georgia play, I watched a bunch of their games from the recent European Championship, which, again, they won 17th time that they've won it, 8th time in a row that Georgia has dominated that European Championship, especially the game against Spain, which they won 46-28. Georgia likes to play a very physical game, but what they also like to do is they'll use any kind of penalty that you take to really get the ball down towards your territory. So if there's a penalty, they'll kick it to touch, and then they'll use their line out and maul just to punish you at that try line area. It was in your 22. That's how they scored all their tries against Spain. That's how they scored a majority of tries against the European teams. They're a very physical team, wear you down until they get to the try zone area, and then they just bowl you over. So a very physically demanding team, and I feel that's why Coach Scott Lawrence is bringing in 7 forwards to hopefully give backup to what's probably going to be a very physical and worn down forward pack in our team. So just highlighting, because that, again, the reserves are all different. They've all been changed from the reserve from Scotland to the reserves now. Just to highlight a couple of people that are going to be there. 2 people that possibly will debut if they come off of the bench. Nafi Maafu, who has never played Major League Rugby. He is a USA-born player, but he has been making most of his career in Europe. He plays for the Montauban team in France for the top 14 league. And then Brandon Harvey, who's played a couple of years for San Diego, the now defunct San Diego Legion. He could possibly make his debut cap if he comes off the bench. USA born, though he went to school in Cardiff, Wales, for college, and then came back, like I said, a couple of years with the San Diego Legion. He will possibly make his debut if he comes off the bench. And then what I like about, especially considering we're now hearing announcements of players making new teams, and of course, unfortunately, we've been hearing the defunct of another team. Utah Warriors, unfortunately, will not be coming back for the Major League Rugby 2026 season. So you're seeing a lot of players making moves, becoming unattached, or finding new teams. It's great to see this Eagle lineup because then you start to see some possible moves that haven't been made officially. One of them in particular, Christian Prince Poidevin, officially now a California Legion player, where he used to be a San Diego Legion, now officially joining the California Legion. Another player that I just kind of didn't notice, but has been officially made a California Legion player. Peyton Tele'elao has also been now officially California Legion player. And then also, too, just they made the announcement, this one made officially by Anthem Rugby. Luke Carty is now an Anthem Rugby player. He was formerly of the NOLA Gold. Unfortunately, NOLA Gold, one of the many teams that are now not taking part in the 2026 season. So again, lots of changes for Scott Lawrence. Hopefully those changes will make a difference, especially with a very physical team like Georgia. Just a little preview of the Georgia team. I couldn't find their starting roster, so I can't really tell you who's going to be playing, but I will highlight a couple of players who I feel will more than likely play, and we got to keep an eye out for. The most important especially is Aka Tabusadze, also known as Akaki Tabusadze, winger. He is the top try scorer for Georgia with 50 tries. He actually added 3 of those tries during the game against Spain. What's remarkable about that record is that Akaki is only 27 and he only has 51 caps for Georgia. So literally he has been scoring a try every time he has played for Georgia. What's also really remarkable is that 50 tries makes Aka the 6th highest try scorer in international rugby competition. So these are only tries that are counted when there's test matches or Rugby World Cup matches. So international, when you're playing for your national team, and you know, the lifespan of a national team player for some countries is only maybe 10 years. You can see a couple people maybe playing for a couple decades, but that's very rare. So usually 10 years and you're done. So to see a guy like Aka, who's only been playing for Georgia for maybe like 4 or 5 years, be able to get 50 tries, that's really, really impressive. And again, 6th top try scorer in the all of test match competition. And if you're just curious, the record is currently held by Daisuke Ohata, Japanese player, with 69 as the top try scorers. I believe the top try scorer for the United States is only at 29, so nowhere near the record of 50 just yet. So Aka, definitely a person to watch out for. Winger, very fast, very physical, big player. And then because of Georgia's tendency to want to score on the maul and off of the line out maul and score, gotta watch out for their hooker, possible hooker on this game, Vano Kardzkaze. He is a young player for Georgia, only played for Georgia now for 12 caps, I believe. So even though very young, very strong, very powerful, he also got a hat trick playing against Spain in the European Rugby Championship, simply because, like I said, Georgia loves to score off of the line-out maul, and that is usually their strategy. So USA really going to have to get their defense going with the maul protection, and just, they're going to have to get ready for a big, drag-them-out fight. Georgia's going to get very, very physical, and USA is just going to have to fight physicality with physicality, or at least try to do what I thought the strategy was going to be with Scotland. Try to outscore at the beginning. Try to just outpace Georgia. I feel that might not be a bad strategy, but definitely got to be prepared for a very physical fight, which, to be honest, especially during the Pacific Nations Tournament, I felt USA tried to get very physical with a lot of the teams, especially Samoa and Tonga. But, Georgia is probably around that same caliber, and I don't think USA fared horribly physically. But I just don't... I don't know if that's necessarily the best strategy to play against a team like Georgia. It might be better just to outplay them with the speed on the edges, with the wingers, and then hopefully hope that your physicality holds out. So that's just my thoughts with the game. Is this a winnable game? Yes, it is. It is a winnable game. Again, the last couple of matches that USA and Georgia played, with the exception of the one that they recently played, been very close games. No more than a separation of about 4 points or so. So it's not that USA can't beat Georgia. It's just whether or not USA will be able to outlast Georgia. It's going to be a very physical game, as I mentioned, which is why, again, Scott Lawrence has picked the 7 reserve forwards to possibly, provide a lot of power at the end of the matchup when everybody is tired. So hopefully that will pay off. Again, that matchup, Saturday, November 8th. You can watch on Paramount Plus. It's gonna be an interesting game. And again, all these matches in this fall international window, very, very important for the Rugby World Cup draw, which will happen December 3rd. Because the way that we finish in the rankings will determine how that draw plays out. So every win does matter. Again, losses when it comes to playing higher ranked teams away at their home stadium. Even if USA loses to Georgia, I don't feel they'll drop, if any. I think they'll stay at 15. They didn't drop a spot when they lost to Scotland. But if they can beat Georgia, you're definitely assured USA will go up a few spots. So that will, of course, help. So, again, thank you very much, as always, for watching my video. I always appreciate the support. And, again, check out this game, Paramount Plus. Support your Eagles. And I'll see you on the pitch. Go USA.